Now, the price of chicken is on the rise, and Hume International says South Africans should brace themselves for a festive season without it. According to the latest figures from the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, the price of 10 kilogram of chicken has risen by over 10 rand in August. Fred Hume from the Hume International joins us now for more on this. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Fred. We do appreciate it. I think there's a lot to speak about at the moment, but maybe just speak to us about what the next 3 months are going to look like in terms of the availability of poultry, but also the concern around the increase of prices.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. We are certainly concerned that South Africa faces a significant shortage of poultry, largely as a result of the devastating avian influenza epidemic currently sweeping the country. South Africa recently concluded the poultry master plan and implemented anti-dumping duties on a number of the most important trading partners, namely Brazil and a number of European member states. The South African poultry industry committed to that they were able to supply the market adequately, and they would be able to do this without any significant increases in price. Unfortunately, I think their plans never took into consideration the avian influenza threat, something that's endemic in poultry flocks globally, and is in fact a recurring problem, occurring multiple times a year in most producing countries. And unfortunately, we're now faced with a situation where we've locked out imports largely, particularly on bone-in chicken, and we're faced with significant domestic shortages of production. I believe that these shortages are only going to be exacerbated in the coming months. One of the biggest day-old chick producers in the country was especially hard hit. And we will see those shortages feeding through in 2 to 3 months' time, when those birds would have been expected to hit the shelves.
I just want to go a little bit more in depth, if we can, Fred, around the avian flu. How much of this is impacting the poultry industry here in South Africa? What does it actually look like practically?
Well, millions of birds have been culled, and unfortunately, this is the only way in which one can contain the spread of this disease. Our concern here is, and of course we are interested parties. We importers of protein, all frozen foods, but heavily skewed towards animal protein. And we've always felt that imports play a very necessary, essential role in food security in any country. Consider this. Well, we consider this avian influenza epidemic currently. Unfortunately, not much domestic producers can do about that. And it has the effect then of curtailing supply or output, and you would have then expected imports necessarily to fill that void. And this unfortunately can't happen at the moment because of these anti-dumping duties that have been imposed, rightly or wrongly. I don't feel we need to comment about that. I really just feel that, at a time like this, certainly it really exposes the fact that you cannot rely solely on domestic production. It's the old adage rings true once more, putting all your eggs in one basket. So imports are necessary to maintain, food security, especially in times of crisis such as this. I believe they act as a very important price regulator. I also think that competition drives innovation. And if you don't have imports to contend with, unfortunately, domestic producers become complacent, and they have the ability to increase price unchecked.
I did want to go into a bit of detail around the trading issue. I'm not sure if you can maybe just elaborate on that and how much that's actually also in a negative for us in terms of trying to avoid the fact that the poultry prices are expected to go up because, as you mentioned, putting all our eggs in one basket, that's obviously impacting the industry.
Certainly. Look, duties have been ratcheted up over the course of the last few years. So certainly protectionism is nothing new in this space. But it, unfortunately, with really punitive duties, as we're seeing currently, of up to 265% in the case of certain Brazilian producers, South Africa is currently importing 5 to 6 times less bone-in chicken than it was 3 to 4 years ago. And this considering that imports only constitute about 20% of the poultry consumed in the country, and that 20% includes MDM, or mechanically deboned meat, which is used in the production of processed products. Certainly, it's an important contributor, but certainly not to such an extent that it threatens domestic production. I think more in the, it plays the role that we mentioned earlier, or I mentioned earlier, that it acts as a price regulator, it drives innovation. Other issues would be that it obviously then would help you fill that supply gap in the event that there was an issue with domestic production. Yeah, I think that, I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, and sorry, continue.
The other thing I wanted to say is that imports are also key in the sense that they provide a source of cuts that we are perennially short of. Things like chicken wings, we never have enough of it. Certain boneless cuts like boneless leg meat, which is not produced in any great quantity in this country. We've mentioned, South Africa produces very little of this. So, I would like us to see imports possibly as a complementary contributor to domestic poultry supply, rather as opposed to this, conflicting state, that exists or the media seems to portray, between domestic production and imported goods.
Yeah. Just lastly, Fred, I want to just lastly speak about what we can expect in the next 3 months in terms of the price increases. Obviously, that's of big concern. Everything is going up, and people are obviously worried, and there's a very high demand of chicken in this country, especially from me when I love to have my chicken licken. So I just want to know what is expected in terms of the price increase, especially also moving into the festive season.
Well, sadly, we expect double-digit price increases, particularly concerning at a time when poultry prices or food prices in general in many of our trading partners are declining. Countries like the US are experiencing significant food price deflation, and that's on the back of economic growth. South Africa currently is in a low to no growth environment with rapidly rising food prices. I think in my mind and probably in many others, that's a recipe for disaster.
And I'm sure load shedding also contributes significantly to all of this, doesn't it, Fred?
It certainly does. It certainly does. And that's something that one shouldn't try and vilify and blame imports. Unfortunately, a lot of the cost increases or cost pressures that domestic producers are facing are largely as a result of issues such as load shedding. Domestic producers have had to spend significant amount of money on installing generators, the cost of running those. In many cases, they've had to treat their own water. They've had to innovate and supply their own water in certain dysfunctional municipalities. So, I think unfortunately, we're using tariffs to protect an industry which unfortunately is in a state of crisis. But it's not in a state of crisis because of imports. It's in a state of crisis because of issues with the supply of electricity, water, other services. These are what is caused. Those are the issues that are causing the local producers to be non-competitive globally. It's not competition from imports.
Certainly, it does seem like a very worrying trend here, but hopefully it will be sorted out sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Fred Hume, who is the Managing Director